All right, everyone, welcome back to Paging America, where we explore the power, profit, and politics shaping American healthcare and what you can do about it. I'm your host, Miles Baker, along with Dr. Rob Davidson. Dr. Rob, great to see you. How are you doing today?
Well, it's good to see you too. How am I doing? I don't know. I've done a lot of shows lately, podcasts and, Sirius radio and Substacks and all that. So it's good to be back talking to you about a lot of the crazy shit going on. I appreciate your takes. And yeah. So how about you? Occupied Chicago yet?
Yeah. It dominates the mind. If you live in Chicago, you're thinking about this. This is, I know folks in DC are thinking about it since it's sort of changed the landscape of the city and brunch in particular, since that seems to be the main thing they're doing is menacing people at brunch and at the train station. But no, the latest in Chicago is it sounds like there was a leaked memo that the military has sent like an advance team of some kind. And I'm not a national security expert. I'm not exactly sure what they're up to, but we don't have troops. There's no Humvees at the train station yet. So,
well, if they're locations
another beautiful
in DC,
summer day in Chicago.
If they're tourist spots in DC and brunch locations in DC are any indicator, I suspect something near Pizzeria Uno and Due, right? Because they're kind of kitty corner down the street. Probably something near the Water Tower place, like a real show of force for all those shoppers coming to Chicago.
Yeah, Jesus. Right.
Yeah, can't wait.
We're coming up on the end of summer. It looks like it's going to be the safest summer since 1965 in the city of Chicago. I did Bike the Drive the other day where they shut down DuSable, which is the highway that runs. If you're not familiar with the city, there is a beautiful highway that runs along the lakeshore, the full length of the city. They shut that down, and you get many, many, many thousands of bicyclists that go up and down. It was probably one of the most bucolic and serene scenes I've seen in the city. And I thought, well, they're just going to fuck this up with soldiers, aren't they?
Yeah. How do you ride a bike through checkpoints? I mean, that seems like inconvenient.
Yeah.
Just inconvenient.
It would be super annoyed. It would be like stopping the kids on Lime scooters on Milwaukee Avenue. Anyway, we got a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
I have just a quick show note. We are recording this during the RFK Senate hearings. And so expect another show on that. We're going to produce after we see the results of that. We're gonna have some reaction to that and some experts weighing in. But we're not gonna do that on this show. We're gonna get you up to speed. So if you're looking for RFK hearing reactions, stick around. There'll be more content coming shortly after we publish this. One more show note. On the back end of the show, we have an interview with the CEO of Tavern Research, Matt Lackey, who's going to walk us through some really interesting survey results they got on the MAHA movement, sort of picking apart the complicated basket of opinions that exist in the I think, not homogenous MAHA movement and helping us understand sort of those things, the varied and different opinions that exist in that movement. So if you're interested in MAHA, or if you're interested in sort of the technical side of survey research, I think either interest, it's a really great interview. So stick around for that. So Rob, the first thing I want to talk about today is this extremely startling news out of Florida, where Florida just weeks, and I'm going to pull something here from the Miami Herald, just weeks into the new school year, Florida Surgeon General Joseph Ladapo announced that the state is going to be working to eliminate all vaccine mandates. Ladapo, who made the announcement at a press conference Wednesday, said forcing vaccine mandates is wrong and drips with disdain and slavery. I don't know really what to say to that. I think this means that folks are going to be able to go to public school without vaccines, it sounds like. Yeah. What does that mean for people who have little kids in Florida and for the rest of us?
I mean, this is so dangerous, right? I mean, we say it all the time. Ben's saying it, like public vaccination programs have been the single biggest advancement in the 20th century and now into the 21st century for healthcare in this country, for public health, for decreasing the number of kids, dead people. I was just doing a Substack Live from Lincoln Square, and she said something about, are we going to go back to like little kids' graves, measles and polio? I mean, like infant or child mortality was such a big thing 100 years ago or so, right? Because of these preventable diseases. And we've done such an amazing job at nearly eliminating many of these deadly diseases. And what that means for the kids who don't get vaccinated is being at extreme high risk. And the problem with it being like kids is somebody else is making that decision. And parents have the right to make healthcare decisions for their kids. But boy, when something like this, it's really terrifying to think some little 6-year-old has no idea that their parent is listening to someone like Joseph Ladapo or RFK Jr. is drank the Kool-Aid on the complete nonsense that is anti-vax rhetoric, and they are now at risk. But, other kids are at risk too, because not a single vaccine ever developed is 100% effective, right? Some are approaching that, but none of them are 100%. Right. And so the only way we achieve true immunity as a population is having enough people vaccinated so that it just isn't out there. That virus or that bacterium just isn't around. And by doing this, you're just increasing the odds of it circulating amongst kids who are unvaccinated and then creeping into kids who are vaccinated who aren't maybe as well protected as others. It should be so alarming for Florida parents. And, you hate to tell people because it does, again, comes from a position of privilege, because as a physician, you can kind of get a job in pretty much anywhere, right? There's jobs. But man, if I was a parent in Florida, I don't know that I'd want to be a parent of a school kid in Florida for a whole lot longer. I might be looking to go elsewhere. Because again, you can get your kid vaccinated, but they're still at risk, man. It's pretty scary.
Yeah. Yeah. Me, we got a kid coming, and I think, we were sort of planning, we planned out like when we were first going to go maybe on a vacation or travel with a kid, and we were saying, we got to get through the vaccine schedule and sort of on the calendar for an unborn child. We were saying the vaccine schedule happens here, then we can get out of Dodge. And we didn't really
at least get through 6 months, right? You're 2, 4, and 6 months. You get kind of big whammies up front, and then after that, they've got some immunity, some big bad things, and that's it. That's a good time to kind of get them accustomed to travel. We did that with our kids, and that made life easier as they got older. But that has to be, now you have to figure where you can actually go, I don't know if you're Disney folks, but I don't know if I'd take my kid to Disney, if they, amongst all of this, that's pretty scary, maybe we go out to Anaheim and go to that Disney instead.
Yeah. It says Joseph Ladapo is a boon for the California Disneyland as opposed to
Disney World. That's right. There's also Disney in Paris and Disney I don't know about Hong Kong anymore, but yeah.
This Joseph Ladapo guy seems just like a craven. He was trying to score points on COVID in a way that was so extreme back in the day. Yeah, I had sort of thankfully forgot that he existed until I saw this news about.
Well, he was out, and I think he was out in California, and Ron DeSantis, imported him to Florida. He thought he did such a fantastic job of spreading anti-COVID, anti-vaccine rhetoric. He wanted to bring him in and kind of, somehow do more damage to the folks of Florida than DeSantis already managed to do on his own. And looks like this is now a success.
Yeah. That's too bad. Well, we hope the parents in Florida will go out and find correct information, and not necessarily. It seems like, we'll get into the CDC in a second, but it does seem like they are using the public health infrastructure as, in so many ways, both state and federal, when it comes to vaccines, or when it came to COVID at the time, or sort of ongoing conversations around COVID, and then also on reproductive rights. I know in Florida, they were using some of the public health infrastructure to combat the Florida ballot initiative that would have made abortion legal in the state, or would have expanded reproductive rights. They were using the public health infrastructure to basically campaign against that ballot initiative down there, including to the tune of lots of money on television, that public money on television. It was just sort of an incredible repurposing of government as political weaponry. I hope we don't see more of it, Rob. I find it very troubling. I think when you think of the Trump administration, we call it authoritarian creep and their authoritarian impulses. DeSantis's authoritarian impulses and the use of the state for political ends has been, he's been doing it for years. This is not new territory. If you've been down in Florida, what we're seeing at the federal government.
Yeah. It's, again, just highly dangerous, and they seem to know that they can get away with it, right? Especially in the era of Trump. Right. I think when you're criming all the time, it's kind of hard to single out any one crime to get people on. So they figure they can, I don't think the courts could keep up with all the criming going on in MAGA world. Right. So they just do what they want, and ask for forgiveness after the fact.
Yeah. I just encourage, could they use a different part of the government, like a slightly less important part of the government instead of the public health infrastructure? If you guys got to use the government to do crimes or to do politics, could you skip the health department?
Yeah. Road commission. I don't know. Something.
Right.
Well, I mean, I
Something.
talked about this. I talked about this today earlier on an interview, how, RFK was put in place to get Trump the voting block, right? He needed the Maha voting block to get elected. And so, I mean, if you want to do that with an undersecretary of who knows what at transportation or some ambassador to some country that isn't super strategic on the world stage, I don't know, probably still not great, but okay. But when you do that for like one of the two biggest agencies, in the government, HHS, and something that is charged with like keeping people healthy and not having people die, particularly craven, and just shows like the transactional nature of everything about this president and about this whole movement. It's all about personal, benefit and gain and that of your cronies, and very little to do with actually, looking out for the folks out there and the red hats who are singing your praise.
Okay, Rob, on to the next news. Just to revisit a little bit, we talked about this last week, but to revisit what's happening at the CDC, just to set this up. Last week, CDC Director Susan Monarez was ousted by the Trump administration. She was escorted out of the building by security. In response to the firing of Monarez, 4 senior CDC officials announced their resignations. They were escorted out of the building amid applause and cheers of the CDC employees who staged a rally to honor their decision. So just to recap, especially if you're watching the RFK hearings today, we had the decapitation of the CDC, and then we had 4 senior leaders out at the CDC. This is on the heels of a pretty extreme shooting at the CDC. And then you have like sort of lower level officials holding like a rally of support for the senior officials that are walking out. The CDC seems like a place that should be boring as a rule. Right. Like it should be a pretty boring working, like it should not have this much excitement at the CDC. It's just really too bad. And just one thing on this is like Susan Monarez and these officials seem incredibly brave to have stuck around there and waited until they felt like they would be doing harm if they executed what was being asked of them. It just strikes me that we're going to need a lot of bravery in the next couple of years, and these people are showing us the way in some ways.
Yeah, you said it should be boring, and I can't think of one person who went into public health as a career to get famous, right? To be known. You can see people going into healthcare to be deemed important, right? I mean, I know in the ER when we're running a code, I'm top of the food chain on that, and everyone's kind of looking at me for what to do next. And I say, yes, I want to do that, right? That's what I've been trained to do. Yep. And surgeons in the OR are known to have pretty decent egos. Like, I guess I don't mind that if they're cutting me open and not cutting bad things. Like, that's okay. Yeah. Yes, be confident.
You want a confident surgeon.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, we can take criticism of, docs who, go on TV and want to make hay about all this shit that's going on. But people in public health, to a person that I've ever met in my career, in my education, I got my MPH a few years ago during COVID. Not a single one of them is someone like seeking the limelight, right? When they do the job well, you don't know about it. You don't know about the disease outbreak that was prevented or stopped dead in its tracks. And that's a good thing. And so talking about CDC this much and it being in the news this much for everything, that's really, I think, probably very stressful for them and for everybody in public health at the state level, the county level, in cities, really stressful because these folks don't want to be part of politics. Now we're finding public health practitioners deciding to get more involved in politics, right? Defend Public Health, a group of academics and researchers and epidemiologists, has emerged, and a lot of other groups has emerged. I know within the Committee to Protect Healthcare, we have quite a few people involved in public health who are wanting to speak out, but not because it's something they sought in their lives. It's because they're seeing this damage being done. And they said, okay, I guess I'm going to have to do the uncomfortable thing and actually put my name and my face and my voice out there defending the thing that I do. I guess I'm hopeful, for that piece of it, right? The mobilization of these folks in opposition and in advocacy for the craft that they've committed their lives to. But the damage is going to be generational, right? It's going to take a while to build it back up.
It really is. There's one of the gentlemen at the CDC. I want to focus in on his case because I think it speaks to like one, the bigotry of some of the folks on the right here, but but then two, how complete the attack is on vaccines and how they're trying to conflate vaccines and the culture war. So with the culture war. So one of the four folks who left at the CDC, Demetre Daskalakis, who led the National Center for Immunization and Respiratory Diseases, pulled back the curtain on the anti-vax direction of the agency. So one of his public statements after departing the CDC, Daskalakis added that he was very concerned that there's going to be an attempt to relitigate vaccines that have already had clear recommendations with science that has been vetted. He warned this could undermine public trust. If you can't attack access, then why not attack trust? And I think that that's the playbook. So he's calling it for what it is. So in addition, it's not just RFK. So we had Rand Paul gave an interview to The Hill this week bashing Daskalakis' support for vaccinating infants against hepatitis B. I think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
That seems like a good idea. But he says, so this is Rand Paul. One of the guys that is the biggest proponent of doing all this is the guy who describes the risky behavior that he and his lifestyle involve. So basically, Rand Paul is going after him for being an out gay man. By basically by having like sort of a bigot attack on his sexuality, he is going after vaccines, and he's conflating the culture war with the vaccines, like that would have anything to do with whether the hepatitis B vaccine was a safe and effective vaccine. That's crazy to me. And it's so scary. It also like conjures up, the lavender scare was a purge that happened like way back in the day with Congress where they would try to out people and accuse people of being gay men or lesbians. And it was a way to discredit political opponents. And that seems so far away. That is such generations ago. That was something that occurred in the United States of America. And it seems like Rand Paul is trying to bring it back and do it as part of the strategy to attack public health.
Yeah. I mean, so this is Dr. Rand Paul, who didn't join I think he was an eye doctor, didn't join get board certified for doing that surgery, created his own board on the outside of that board certification process to be able to do that, and then touts himself as a great libertarian that just wants to let people live their lives and do their thing. And yet he's now dragging Dr. Daskalakis, through the mud based on Dr. Rand Paul's perceived connection between being an out gay man and the ability to be a leader at CDC and have medical opinions based on fact and science. It's bullshit. It should be a wake up call for anyone on the left, on the right. These guys will do anything to push their agenda. And Rand Paul is willing to try to conflate this, right? Maha does a similar thing with putting together all the little pieces of Maha, whereby if you accept that maybe pesticides in food aren't a good thing, I will acknowledge that. Would rather have fewer pesticides. Maybe the dyes in foods should be non-toxic. Yep, let's make sure that's true. But you gotta take on the anti-vaccine bullshit. You gotta listen to RFK when he says, RFK is a guy who back in the day, not that long ago, said, well, HIV isn't necessarily the cause of AIDS. He was saying that people were saying it was poppers because gay men used poppers, and that there was a direct link, right? Not understanding, correlation does not equal causation.
Right.
Like, they're wanting people to now accept I guess maybe trying to drag in kind of homophobic culture war piece of this to say, well, if you're that, then surely this guy can't be trusted. So he must be lying and gaslighting you about vaccines. And it's dangerous. It's gross. It's like, this guy should be, I don't know. He should have some consequence for doing this as a sitting senator. I hope somebody does this on his side or on our side. I haven't heard a lot of pushback against this yet.
What the fuck were the Democrats doing? Letting RFK speak at some of their events before. I remember he was like a Democrat in good standing. If people remember back to the Obama years, he was a Democrat in good standing, but gay moral panic to undermine public health is not like a new tactic for them.
No.
And it seems like it's been part of his playbook for a while now. Why did they even let him in the door?
I think the Kennedy name, right? Yeah, it does,
Jesus.
right? The card-carrying Kennedy part of it gets you admittance, or got him admittance. Now, his entire family has kind of denounced everything he stands for and has come out against him. If he'd channel his uncle and his dad a little bit more, maybe we could be on some solid footing. But it's the unfortunate nature of two-party politics, right? If a Kennedy won in the day, even though a crazy, worm brain infested bear killing Kennedy wanted to come and speak at your thing, probably got people in seats. And so it was thought to be an okay idea.
Well, I like, I hate that they're bringing back this sort of, it's not, they've been doing it for a while
Right.
They did it during the election too, but I mean that when it puts it in stark relief when it's applied to public health conversations, as opposed to Republicans have always used gender panic or moral panic around elections. It's like it's been part of their playbook as long as I have been able to read the newspaper. So I guess that maybe I'm just desensitized. It's still gross, but I'm desensitized to it. But when it's reapplied to undermining public health, it takes on it feels like it's extra sinister in that context. But
well, Pete Buttigieg, Mayor/Secretary Pete, faced this, all the time as Secretary of Transportation, right? Undermining his excellent leadership at that agency because he's a gay man who's married to a man who has kids, and sort of denigrating accepting him as a parent like other parents. I mean, it's not, again, not new in the very recent past. It's just particularly troubling when a sitting U.S. senator and a cabinet secretary are the people doing it, right? Like if Alex Jones and the fringes of the internet, they say all sorts of crazy shit, and I guess we can't expect anything more out of them. I think we should be able to expect a little bit more out of a U.S. senator, right? One in the club of 100 and a sitting cabinet secretary, but doesn't seem like that's the case.
Yep, that's right. All right, I'm going to do a quick Committee to Protect Healthcare plug. If you're a doctor and you're listening to the show and you want to join the Committee to Protect Healthcare and fight back against this bullshit, please do. Dr. Rand Paul, you are not invited to become a member. You can stay where you are.
All right. But Dr. Daskalakis, you're absolutely invited. And if anybody knows Dr. Demetre Daskalakis and wants to give him my email, rob@committeetoprotect.org, please share.
We'd love to talk to him. So, Rob, the New York Times is reporting that Medicare is conducting a pilot program called the Wasteful and Inappropriate Service Reduction Model. In that very benign
name. That sounds boring and benign.
Yeah, that sounds boring. That must not be anything. Yeah. The Wasteful and Inappropriate Service Reduction Model will be rolled out in 6 states to require, drumroll, prior authorization for certain procedures. The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services plans to begin a pilot program that would involve a similar review process for traditional Medicare, the federal service program for people 65 and older, as well as for many younger people with disabilities. The pilot would start in 6 states this year. Rob, for listeners who aren't physicians, can you explain prior authorization briefly and why people get so pissed off about it?
Yeah, so prior authorization is insurance companies' ways of denying care, to be straightforward. It's requiring doctors to justify getting certain procedures for patients or certain treatments for patients. It sounds okay on its surface, of course, why wouldn't you want that, right? But in practice, what it is, it's doctors sitting on phone trees for interminable amounts of time to then talk to maybe a doctor, maybe not, maybe some kind of more bureaucratic minded individual trying to justify. And I mean, it's very much anecdotal, but also very much rooted in actual data on the kinds of things that they deny. And the reality of prior auth is the default for so many of these profit-driven insurance companies is to deny, and maybe then eventually approve something if the doctor or the patient keeps pushing hard enough. But the reality is they know people most of the time will just give up because they don't have the time to sit on those phone trees forever and ever and ever. My wife is a family doc. I've mentioned this. I remember coming home saying, I've got a 62-year-old with a family history of heart disease and high blood pressure and cholesterol, having chest pain, and I wanted a stress test, and they denied it. And she had to sit on the phone for 20 minutes through, 5 different phone trees to eventually get some doc to say, oh yeah, that makes sense. Okay, that's okay. It's something that obviously is indicated and is appropriate. Now, the other piece of this project isn't just adding prior authorization to Medicare, which hasn't been done before. It's the way they're doing it, right? They're now going to use AI, and they're going to reward the technology companies for denying claims, right? They're going to have a monetary benefit to the more claims they deny. So incentivizing setting up the model to do just what the human versions do at big insurance like United Healthcare, to deny, and then reap the financial rewards of that as the AI tech company. And I think this has been dubbed by many, and I think it's appropriate, as the AI death panels.
AI death panels. And so Dr. Oz is in charge of CMS. And so Dr. Fraudster, Grifter, Dr. Oz is in charge of setting up a robot to intervene when a physician says a patient who is 65 years or older or disabled needs a treatment, that there will now be a robot in between that decision and the government paying for it, at least in 6 states in their pilot program. Am I correctly formulating
well,
that?
and I think let's say it here first. Can someone please look into the investments of said Dr. Oz into AI tech companies? I don't know. I don't have any information on that. But if that were to be true, that would be the least shocking thing that you could tell me today.
That's right.
That this guy was somehow going to profit off of this.
Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah.
We'll
so, I mean, I guess the future is now, and they're coming up with ways again for tech billionaires to extract profit out of the healthcare system. This time it's denying grandma and grandpa the test that they need or the treatment they need. And I saw the list of some of the initial ones, incontinence treatment. That seems like something that's pretty important to an elderly person out there in the world, right? They'd rather, that seems like a good thing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's just one of the ones I remember them listing. And it's just, treatment for pain, right? Injections for chronic pain. Pain is the most common complaint people come to the ER with, is pain of any kind, back pain, chronic headaches. And then to set this up to sort of routinely deny these treatments and let people suffer. Yeah. So I think it's, if you're in one of those 6 states, I guess stay tuned right now. But if you're anywhere in this country, like it seems like in this profit-driven society and where everyone's extracting a little bit out of healthcare, just another little trick, seems like something they're probably going to spread to everyone.
Yeah. So the AI, just so people know that some of the procedures, not an exhaustive list, include incontinence control, cervical fusion, certain steroid injections for pain management, like nerve stimulators, and the diagnosis and treatment of impotence. We're going to have federal robots weighing in on people's impotence. Cool.
Seems like a problem. I think we can all get behind.
Seems like a problem.
Probably wanting to help people with that if we can, right?
Yeah. All right, you heard it here first, Rob. This show is officially against federal robots weighing in on people's impotence.
Amen.
We are
libertarian in that respect.
Yep. No. Okay, so we're gonna stay on top of this. We're gonna be talking about the AI death panels as we learn more about them. But that's what a bummer. Actually, I can't think of. I just cannot. I can't get over it. I can't. It seems like I play with ChatGPT. We're gonna actually talk about some AI applications in the interview here that are really interesting and really cool, but it's not 100% all the time, no one thinks it is. I think when applied to the healthcare setting, and particularly around prior authorization and how sometimes time really matters, right? When you're ordering up tests or ordering up treatments for something, that if you're putting a robot in between and it's blocking things, it's really going to cause a lot of suffering, it seems like. So anyway.
Yeah, and in the ER, we don't usually deal with prior auth, right? Because they're there for an emergency condition. You order whatever test you need to order. You do it hopefully based on clinical grounds and based on evidence-based medicine. But what happens with private insurers is they try to come back and deny claims based on them perceiving that the things you did weren't necessary. And a while back, we sort of dispensed with this. We have now something called the prudent layperson standard, meaning if prudent layperson thinks that what they're coming in with is an emergency, it's an emergency. Because I see people with chest pain, but not every person I see with chest pain has a heart attack or a blood clot or a collapsed lung or an aneurysm, right? Some of the really deadly causes of chest pain.
Right.
But they come in, particularly folks with risk factors, worrying that they may or may not have that. And you may do an EKG, you may do some blood tests, you may do x-rays, CAT scans, that kind of thing. And there had been times now that it's been largely pushed back against, where if everything came up negative and they were sent home with a diagnosis that wasn't a life-threatening condition, the insurance company would say, well, see, that wasn't an emergency, so we're not going to pay for that. It's like, well, how the hell do you know it was an emergency until you did the tests? And if every person we see and take care of is having a heart attack, a lot of people are sitting at home having heart attacks and aren't being treated and are dying as a result. So like that, in my world, that has got to be what they're thinking of next, letting the AI go through all of our discharges, all of our patients we see, and determine, well, this person, we won't pay for that because they shouldn't have been there in the first place. Yeah, I think it's a scary place. I think AI has a place in healthcare. I think if I were a non-interventional radiologist, I would be very worried about AI. because we already have AI looking at x-rays and then the radiologist
Yeah.
oversees them. Pretty good at pattern recognition and finding calcifications on a mammogram or a fracture on an x-ray. I think not quite so good at determining if somebody needs treatment for their impotence or their chronic pain or their incontinence, and who knows where they're going to roll it out next.
Yeah. It seems like in the practice, when used as a tool or an aid to a clinician or someone doing any analysis, it could end up being a really game changing tool. But I think it's also like a powerful tool like that in the hands of a federal government where there was like a lot of trust and you knew they were working in good faith is a different situation than a federal government that's full of grifters and people with long history of ripping other people off and a long history of stealing. That's a pretty powerful tool for a group of people that it's hard to trust because of their behavior in the past.
For sure.
Anyway, maybe we'll come back to AI death panels soon. How about this, Rob? Now let's go over to the interview. CEO at Tavern Research, Matt Lackey's up next, and had a great conversation. So we'll go to that now. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Paging America. Today's guest, we are joined by Matt Lackey, who is the CEO of Tavern Research, who just completed a large research project on the MAHA movement. And he's here to tell us a little bit about that and what he's learned as a researcher and someone who deals with a lot of public research to help us unpack some things about public sentiment and the Make America Healthy Again movement. Matt, thanks so much for joining us. Where are you coming to us from today?
I'm coming to the podcast from the South Loop in Chicago, Illinois, in America.
Great. Well, also just across town. It's great to be with you. Probably should. Maybe we could have done it in person. Maybe we'll do that next time.
Yeah, next time.
Yeah. Great. Well, your research on MAHA, this really large survey that you guys did with 7,913 responses. I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit, maybe first about Tavern Research, and then get into this, and then we'll jump into the research specifically on MAHA. What is Tavern Research, and what do you guys do there? And just tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah. So we're an AI company, and we happen to do opinion research along the way. Broadly speaking, our point of view is that intelligence that's thrown off of feedback loops is the currency of the future. And specifically what that means is being in the business of generating and measuring allows you to be much better at generating. So we write everything from messages that might show up as campaign slogans or ads. We make videos that go into that can, sort of be evaluated or show up on TV or digital. We can simulate, what organic social looks like, for example. And we want to own both the content generation and the measurement side of it, because the interplay between those two is like really where the value is. So oftentimes our customers are like, well, are you an ad company or are you a pollster? And it's like, no, we're a secret third thing. And
fun.
It makes the fit sometimes weird, but it also allows us to do what is oftentimes uniquely situated and interesting research that I think oftentimes meets the moment in a way that you can't when you disaggregate the two functions.
Yeah, that's great. One of the things that I've found for a long time that's been really difficult is when you're trying to do research or you're trying to understand something, like, for example, something as complicated as MAHA, in a normal poll or a normal research instrument, you have so few bites at the apple, and if you are sort of incorrect in your guesses on what questions you should be asking, it throws the whole thing out the window, and you end up sort of walking down a wrong road and never really knowing it. It's a real challenge for political practitioners. I'm wondering if any component of that you guys are trying to solve for.
Yeah. So there are a few things that I want to hit here. One is I think that your listeners and you and I both sort of fundamentally believe in science. Science is about hypothesis testing, and so that means that you have to come in with a hypothesis. There are basically two approaches to sorting what we ought to do that are widely adopted in politics. One is I throw a lot of things at the wall, and the other one is I throw a few things at the wall. And those few things are sort of cleverly curated. We think that that's just the wrong way to do research. So if you, for example, want to know if you should, and I'm going to use something pretty general here, like if you should be communicating at like a 5th grade reading level or an 11th grade reading level, right? A thing you could do is you could have a message that's written 5th grade level and a message that's written at 11th grade level and test them against each other. But there's a bunch of stuff that's going on in those messages that, create these like confounders, and you can't say it's like, oh, it's absolutely because of this. And so what you need to do is have lots of different expressions of a treatment and measure the aggregate across all of those, where, you sort of balance across all of the things that could confound like why that variable explains something. And you then get a clean read on like, oh, this works. We know what its marginal impact is. We know, you slot it in, and you slot in 5th grade reading level when you're talking about Medicare or when you're talking about climate. And it's giving, what is either like a boost of, like a few percentage points, or it's a multiplier or something like that. But we think that doing sort of like really, really prolific content generation and designing our experiments to sort of fit within that framework allows us to build a growing knowledge base, which is just like so different than the atheoretical approaches. And the other thing that's really nice with that is that when you're doing high frequency and large scale, your risk tolerance goes up pretty dramatically. So one of the things that shows up a lot in both paid media testing and in traditional polling is that you get so few bites at the apple because, one, there's finite time on a survey instrument. And so that means that you get to like squeeze 3 or 4 things in. Right. With a lot of the traditional pollsters, you're paying literally $200 an interview. I mean, I'll say it's rent seeking. And the other side of it is, if you're dealing in ads, you're paying $10,000-$20,000 for an ad. And in both cases, like we're just collecting a lot more interviews because we've automated that whole process, and we're producing, it takes us about a minute to make 200 ads. We have completely different margins. And that means that like we can support a different paradigm for generating evidence. And we've been really thrilled with it so far.
That's great. Yeah. It really is a challenge, and you can see sort of healthcare advocates like me missed what was happening with MAHA, how big it was, where some of the trends were with public opinion. There was, I think, fundamentally a misunderstanding of how big the movement was and how sort of varied it was, sort of where opinions around vaccines were going, where opinions around different ways that people thought about health. And had we had a little bit more research on the front end, maybe could have understood it earlier, maybe could have combated it earlier. So why don't we get into this memo that you all published at Tavern, titled "Surprising New Research Finds Americans Oppose Technology That Kills Us and Supports Technology That Saves Lives." Cheeky, funny. Can you tell us a little bit about what was the approach here to put this survey together, and what were some of the findings?
Yeah, sure. So let me start with the cheeky title is actually like a thing that is part of our values. And I just sort of like, for science communicators generally, we are competing against the most interesting parts of the internet. It's not, is it science versus anti-science? It's science versus, somebody speed running Super Mario. Right. And so like, we really try to live our values and play with attention as a part of the communication of our work product, because like, this is the frontier of science communications now, and we just, sort of have to do it. But Yep. In terms of how we get to what we learned, we had a customer come in about 2 weeks ago, maybe 2.5, I don't know, and asked for some MAHA research. They were opinionated on some of the dimensions that they wanted to look at. Our tech is pretty straightforward in that, like, you can just sort of write questions in like a freeform Google Doc, and we turn it into JavaScript that you can launch on the web, invite people to take surveys, write it back to our database, things like that. But there were a few different components here. One is understanding baseline public opinion on various components of MAHA, which is, I think, really important, because oftentimes what we see political researchers doing is bundling these things together. And, what you indicated a little bit in the lead up here is that this is actually a pretty diverse basket of views. And I would actually like to come back to that in sort of a more theoretical point later. But, we wanted to build baseline opinion research. And then we also wanted to look at, what happens when we stimulate survey respondents by exposing them to hypothetical arguments that might be on both sides of this issue. That gives us not only a read on, how opinion moves as the discourse unfolds, but also it gives us like an absolute read on the salience here, right? Because like we do this type of work when we're talking about Medicare and Medicaid cuts with One Big Beautiful Bill. We see it with, some of the stuff around climate, with some of the stuff around, sort of other like high salience or newsworthy things. And so we can say, sort of like, how does this situate itself, not just in the four corners of this poll, but more broadly? And I can talk about some of the findings now, but I also know I've been sort of monologuing for a minute. So I'll pause before.
Yeah. Well, let's take a look at some of the findings. So I'm going to just tee up some of this. At the first glance, you could read as another partisan divide, but the data tells a richer story. This is from your memo. The public strongly backs Kennedy food safety initiatives like banning artificial dyes, 63% support, stricter FDA review of food additives, 66% support, and restricting ultra-processed foods in federal programs, 51% support. But the public also rejects more controversial opinions on vaccines and public health infrastructure cuts. Could you unpack that a little bit? So it sounds like the MAHA movement generally is people are divided on it. But when you get into the details, you see sort of pretty big swings in favor of some components and either antipathy or opposition, significant opposition to some components of it. What stood out to you in some of those findings?
Well, so there are a few things here. Like one, you can see the traces of the distinct peripheral components of like fringe health that are present in the MAHA movement that sort of turn it into this one coalition that is in fact a bunch of distinct groups. And the thing I want to sort of point to here, and this is a little out of my lane because I'm not really a theory guy as much as I am a like spreadsheet guy. There, say what you will about a political philosopher, Alexander Dugin. He's like not a great guy, or I don't know him personally. He's Putin's favorite political scientist though.
Okay.
But his book, The Fourth Political Theory, like literally outlines how the MAHA movement is built insofar as it talks about, I mean, there's sort of like weird Russia stuff that like I'm not going to get into, but the big thing here is that it is very easy to attack sort of norms in the center from a bunch of different directions simultaneously.
Yeah.
So building a coalition of the periphery against the center means that you are exposing every weak spot in what we would consider sort of like institutions and norms and common sense around a lot of this stuff. One of the most powerful aspects of that approach is that you get to lead with things that have widespread public support. So literally nobody is going to say, you know what everybody needs to do is eat more Twinkies, right? We're not sponsored by Hostess.
We're mobbed up with the food dye companies.
Yeah. So I mean, like the Yellow Five folks are, they are a powerful cohort. The thing that we sort of see here is there is really unobjectionable stuff in MAHA.
Right.
The things that everybody's parents and grandparents and, anybody who has kids would say, like, don't put that in your body, right? Like,
right.
Of course. And then there's other stuff where it's like, well, we just, we eradicated smallpox. That's pretty good. Let's keep that up.
Yeah.
And people aren't nearly as into that. And so like, if you do like a top line, question on like, where's the public at on MAHA? Like, you're going to get a mixed story. And like, it codes more as like a partisan question than it does about like actual opinion on any of the component parts of the agenda.
Sure.
It's pretty diverse.
Yeah. This is actually an interesting point you're making, Matt, about how you compare. So Americans favor the government covering gym memberships and healthy food at 60%, according to your memo. I think that the challenge that some of us have with this is it's so not proportional that to us, or to me at least, I'll just speak for me, that sort of the coverage or non-coverage of a gym membership is such a small component part versus the CDC, the main functions of the CDC, or big cuts at like sort of public health agencies, that those seem sort of not proportional. But do you get any insight into like intensity or if people make some distinctions here within this oppose and support? If does anything register that sort of shows intensity or shows like, it maybe that the top line numbers on banning artificial food dyes are pretty good, but it's not nearly as intense as the way people feel about the handling of the CDC and the public health infrastructure? Or do you see something more complicated?
Yeah, that's a great question. So intensity is really the story here, but this is all of this is much lower salience than the stuff in the One Big Beautiful Bill with respect to cutting like our public health infrastructure. Like,
got it.
Cut Medicare, Medicaid, kicking needy folks off of food assistance. Like those are things that people are like not okay with. Like those are wildly unpopular. And all of this is like, all of the intensity that we observe here is like basically an artifact of like people kind of know they're being measured, and there's like a social desirability bias to be like, yeah, it'd be a good idea to go to the gym, or yeah, it'd be a good idea to eat more healthy or whatever. Like, but this is in a different category from like the Medicaid cuts, and all the threats to like sort of the social safety net and all of the entitlements that folks have earned.
That's good to hear. That's like good to hear as like maybe like like a silver lining that there's that some of the stuff that at least the Democrats will be talking about or ought to be talking about do have higher intensity. What is also true is that we are not going to be able to just talk about Medicaid in all channels at all times in every forum. And some of the high salience issues that Democrats are going to run on, there are going to be places where we are talking about MAHA and we're talking about the topics that MAHA is bringing up. I'm wondering if you could share your thoughts on analyzing sort of what the Democrats ought to be saying or what healthcare advocates ought to be saying who are out there advocating, whether it's for Democrats or whether it's for improving or sort of on a public policy front. Are there recommendations you have for folks who might be messaging on these things and talking about MAHA?
Yeah, I have a bunch, and I'm going to go through the evergreen stuff first because like nobody ever says it, and that's the most important stuff.
Sure.
So number one thing is be comprehensible. We have observed over, at this point, I think like 16 or 17,000 tests that voters and survey respondents, people like that, understanding what the heck you're saying mediates the majority of the persuasion effect. And so like I harp on, writing like a normal human and not like somebody who went to too much grad school. And this is the number one most important thing. And so I would start there. The next most important thing is make sure that you are make sure that what you're saying is actually interesting. And I think that like, in the business that you're in with this podcast, like attention is like, if a tree falls in the woods and no one's around to hear it, right?
Right.
Like that's such a huge deal. And so a lot of the guidance that says always talk about Medicare, always talk about the entitlements or whatever, that is a byproduct of like, that's a medium issue. So like in most of these surveys, you are forcing people to view content and then you're saying like conditional on this view, what happens to your opinion? That's not how the world works. People get to skip content all the time.
Yep.
And so you have to be interesting. You have to be relevant. And if you can put a spin on the day's news, that's one way to do it. You could also obviously be funny, be like very, 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 very good looking, like lots of options here. I do want to say that we don't get to live in the lab. We have to live in the real world where we have to fight for attention. Now, having said all that, there are a few things that I think are probably most valuable here. Number one is there is no reason to fight the stuff that everybody agrees with. So there's broad support. And in fact, like before MAHA, like a lot of this stuff was liberally coded. Like Democrats were like, yeah, let's not eat poison, right? And so I think that not allowing Republicans to own that lane is like a very good idea. I have a good friend who is like a public health expert, and she brought up a thing that she was actually on the Ezra Klein show last week or 2 weeks ago. And there's a real risk with vaccines that they become polarized in a way that climate did. And right now they enjoy pretty broad public support, and the risks to public health of polarizing this issue could be devastating. And one of the things that we can look to here is just like, we can ask people what they believe in a survey, but like you observe the vaccination rates, right? Like people still got the COVID shot. People still are vaccinating their kids before they go to school. And this is really not my domain, but like, I think that, we enjoy herd immunity benefits as long as we're like in the high 80s. And like, you polarize this issue, it gets to the 50s overnight, and then we're fucked.
That's bleak.
Yeah.
We were just talking about at the top of the show what Latipo's doing down in Florida, where they're rolling back mandates for school and they're actively trying to politicize vaccines in like as like one of their cudgels. It's very
that's
troubling. It's
gross.
very troubling. Yeah.
I mean, I think that like, the thing that we have going for us right now is that norms do a lot of work. And this runs a little bit deeper than like what we see in like the four corners of the survey, but like, we know that group opinion, like perceived group opinion, does a lot of work in shaping public opinion. So like if I think that people like me believe a thing, that goes a long way, right? Yep. And when you pierce that belief, we see like a rapid decrease in support. And I mean, it goes both ways. Like this is why the first 25% of union cards in an organizing drive are the hardest to get. You get over 30, they get it pretty easy. You get to 50, and then the next day you're at 75, right? And it's because perceived norms and group norms just do a ton of heavy lifting. And we have that with vaccines right now. Like most of the people who are, participating in society, have been vaccinated, have had their kids vaccinated. So it is an out group activity. And if we let that out group get real big, that's super dangerous.
Yep.
So yeah. So I mean, like, I guess generally speaking, I would not trust the limits of this poll for answering that question, because,
Sure.
what helps Democrats win is not the thing that we want to optimize on here. The thing we want to optimize on here is like making sure that we don't just, get killed by smallpox in a generation.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. One more thing on the least effective messages, and I'm gonna just offer a caveat. Criticizing big wellness or like tying RFK to like a broader war on science is something that you guys concluded is not a particularly effective message.
Yeah.
I would say for someone who like does worry about climate change, although it's not the main thing I work on, is we saw messaging around like science and climate go nowhere fast for a really long time. And it kind of took the climate advocates a long time to pivot. They were sort of advocating for science. You saw a little bit during the pandemic where there became this refrain like follow the science, and I think people were saying that at the beginning with well intention, but it kind of started getting like overused and kind of became something that was maybe not the most effective at the beginning. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about wellness, and I'll give the caveat before you answer. On this podcast, we are going to bash the wellness industry anyway. It just doesn't necessarily mean that we should probably be doing it out in public to a broader audience. When it's physicians talking to one another, we could maybe not let this industry. But why is that not an effective message, or how ineffective is it, and what's the risk if we're out there doing that?
Well, I mean, like, let's just like, I mean, we like, whatever, we have these experimental results that like
Sure.
say a thing, but like evidence is quaint here when compared to like the weight of the evidence that we get from like living in the world. Right.
Okay.
And I think there are a few things that are sort of important to anchor on here. Like, one, we're living through the replication crisis, right? Like, it's not like our science has its house in order, right?
Sure.
Like, we've turned all of science into like a stupid game where you win stupid prizes, and like your worth is tied to like fake credentialing that like only other elites are recognize. And like, that is not science. There's science through a funhouse mirror, and we should not be dying on that hill. That's like number one. Number two is that like a lot of what we see in wellness, just it propagates because it made people feel good. And like,
Popular.
we are running into an issue that we saw in COVID, that we see in climate, which is that people don't believe bad things can happen, but if they can observe good things happening, you're bringing a sport gun to a gunfight. To some extent, there's this like issue of like what gets considered evidence, and I'm one of the, like, in my domain, like, I do not want to live and die by the randomized control trial as the only source of evidence. But I also think that like, I mean, like, we observe it like in these experimental results, but it's also just millions of people pay attention to these folks, and they're consensually opting in to learn more about these things. And if we're just like, well, actually that doesn't work, and in fact, like, people feel better. I don't want to, come off as like too much of a meathead here, but like, like, you would do better as a lifter listening to the big guys at the gym than you would to exercise scientists 50 years ago, right? This is a thing where like like institutionalists, when I say we, like, sometimes I'm an institutionalist, who knows, but like, we're not communicating uncertainty. We're not communicating where there's a lack of depth. And like, that's exploitable, because like, if a thing is uncertain, and like the folks who are on PubMed going through the tables in the appendix to understand like what the error bars actually look like, if they're then just saying this worked and it got peer reviewed, so like we're doing it, like eventually you're going to get caught with like, that doesn't work in replication. And now guess what? The institution was wrong. Like, I'm not trying to defend like people who sell bullshit vitamins and dick pills. Like, that's obviously exploitative. But I also think that like institutional science is in a really bad place right now. And like, it's the sort of thing where like, I don't know, like, we kind of have to get our house in order.
Interesting. That might be a good place to leave it. Matt, that might be a good place to leave it. Matt, thank you so much for joining us. We hope you'll consider coming back as you blaze a new path in research. It was a pleasure learning a little bit from you today.
Yeah, it was a really good time. Thank you for having me. I really, really appreciate it, Miles.
Okay, Rob. Yeah, had a great conversation with Matt. Learned a lot. I think for those of us who are thinking about how to grapple with MAHA, how to understand it, how to fight back in the play, and where are the places where we need to fight back, and where are some of the places where, maybe things that are popular, and you can either support them or just sort of leave them alone. I think we'd learn a little bit more about that. And I think we have to keep learning about what this movement means for healthcare and American politics.
Right. I think you're exactly right. Portions of it that are popular and really are popular across the board shouldn't be dismissed out of turn because they come with the label of MAHA, right? The problem is, just like we said with RFK Jr., with him, you kind of had to swallow the whole big red pill to take all of it, including the anti-vax bullshit that's going to kill people.
Yeah.
And we got to be as good as possible at talking about that and at kind of getting those people to understand the dangers of that and of the entire menu of options when you take it all at once. But yeah, good job on that. I appreciate you doing that interview.
Yeah, that's great. All right. Well, I think, Rob, maybe our time together today has come to an end. So I'm going to read us out. Today's episode was written by Dr. Rob Davidson and me, Miles Baker, and Chris Savage. It was produced by Amelia Dillenschneider and Joel Bryson, editing by Darian Badigan. Our music is by Annette Somerset at Duneflower Productions. If you enjoyed today's show, please subscribe and leave us a rating on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen. Your support helps others discover the podcast. You can also follow Paging America on Substack. And Physicians, Your Voice Matters. Join the fight for better American healthcare by becoming a member of the Committee to Protect Healthcare at www.committeetoprotect.org. Great chatting with you today, Rob. Have a good one.
You too. See you soon to break down the RFK hearings.
Yep. Stick around for those who made it to the end of the episode. Stick around for that. We'll have more shortly. Yep. Talk to you soon.